The council chamber stretched farther than the eye could see. Lights shimmered like stars along the walls, and the air vibrated with the hum of countless conversations. The galaxy's most powerful species had gathered here, in the neutral space station of Arendor Prime, to discuss a threat that could shake the stars themselves. Among them were towering beings, some with 4 or 6 arms, some armored in scales harder than starship metal, and others whose shapes shifted constantly like liquid light. In the center of all this grandeur, sitting on a slightly raised platform, was Kale. Kale was small, even compared to the shortest of the representatives. His fur was soft and brown, his eyes large and dark, and his body was fragile-looking, almost delicate. He knew the whispers, the stares, the barely hidden doubts that passed over the room like waves. They were expecting a failure. After all, how could someone so tiny stand in a room filled with towering warriors, mighty strategists and species who had dominated galaxies for centuries? Kale did not shrink. He had learned long ago that the world measured power in size, speed, or strength. But he had something they did not: an understanding, a mind that could see connections invisible to others, and a courage that did not bow to intimidation. The session began. A voice like rolling thunder echoed through the chamber. "The rogue faction has taken another planet," said the speaker, a crystalline entity whose voice sang in multiple notes at once. "They grow bolder. They must be stopped before they strike at the core worlds." Arguments erupted. One species suggested mass destruction, another spoke of alliances, and a third demanded immediate military action. The room shook with tension. Kale listened quietly, noting details, patterns, and flaws in the proposals. Then came a presence that made the air heavy. Ravok entered, the apex predator. His body towered above all others, muscles corded like living steel, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light, and claws long enough to crush metal. Where he walked, the floor seemed to vibrate. Silence fell. Every species paused, every eye turned. Even the crystalline speaker's notes stuttered mid-song. Kyle felt a strange thrill, not fear but recognition. He had heard stories of Ravok, a warrior feared across countless systems, a hunter who had never been defeated, a being whose judgment could decide the fate of entire civilizations. And now, Ravok was looking directly at him. Kale's heart beat faster, but he did not flinch. Instead, he bowed slightly, showing respect without fear. Ravok's voice rumbled through the chamber. "Is this the one?" he asked, gesturing toward Kale. The other representatives looked puzzled. How could this tiny being matter to someone like Ravok? And then, he said it. "Little brother." A wave of murmurs passed through the room. Whispers of confusion, disbelief, and curiosity. Every species present knew Ravok's respect was not given lightly. If he called someone little brother, it was not a jest. It was acknowledgement. But Kale, the smallest, weakest-looking species in the room? Kale felt a heat in his chest. He could not explain why Ravok had said it, but he felt something stir. An instinct, a connection, a challenge he was ready to face. The council continued, but all eyes occasionally flicked back to Kale and Ravok. Every motion, every glance carried weight. Kale had to focus not just on the meeting, but on understanding why the apex predator had singled him out. After the meeting, Kale was not left alone. A messenger arrived, his tone respectful but urgent. "Ravok requests your presence," it said. The words sent a shiver down Kale's spine. This was not an invitation, it was a summons, and refusals were rarely tolerated. Kale followed the messenger through corridors that twisted and glowed with alien light. Finally, they arrived at a massive door. The air vibrated with a low hum, almost like a heartbeat. The door opened, revealing Ravok standing in a chamber filled with shadows and light. The apex predator did not smile. Smiles were rare for him, almost unheard of. But his eyes, sharp, calculating and alive, studied Kale carefully. "Sit," Ravok commanded. Kale lowered himself onto the floor. The chamber was vast, and even sitting, Kale felt small, but he did not shrink. Ravok circled him slowly, as if assessing every detail, every movement, every breath. "You are not like the others," he said finally. "Your body is small, weak, but I sense something different, something valuable." Kyle nodded slowly, unsure what to say. "I want to see what you can do," Ravok continued. "Not with your fists, not with your claws, with your mind. Show me why I called you little brother." The chamber shifted, walls sliding aside to reveal a complex simulation, dangerous terrain, shifting obstacles, and puzzles that seemed impossible to solve even for large, strong beings. Kale's pulse quickened. This was the test, not of strength, but of intelligence, creativity, and courage. He stepped forward. Every nerve was alert. He navigated the simulation with precision, observing patterns, avoiding traps, and using clever methods no brute force could achieve. He leapt, ducked, and used tools designed for larger hands in ways no one expected. Every step was measured, every choice calculated. Ravok watched silently. Occasionally he made a low sound, almost like approval, but said nothing. Time passed, and Kale's efforts brought him closer to the simulation's core, a glowing orb, representing the final challenge. He paused, studying it carefully. One wrong move could trigger failure. But Kyle saw a path others would not. A path that required patience, insight, and courage. Carefully, he executed his plan. The orb glowed, brighter, then stabilized. The simulation ended. Ravok nodded slowly, a rare gesture of approval. "You are cunning," he said. "Brave, unyielding, and small. Yet you carry the heart of a warrior larger than most in this room. That is why you are my little brother." Kale felt a strange mixture of pride, relief, and awe. To be recognized by Ravok, not for size, not for muscle, but for mind and courage, was something beyond honor. It was validation. The chamber doors opened again, returning Kale to the council floor. But now he felt different. The whispers, the doubts, the stares, none mattered. He had been seen, and by the fiercest warrior in the galaxy no less. As Kale returned to his seat, the other representatives looked at him with newfound interest. Whispers of curiosity replaced doubt. Even those who had dismissed him now regarded him with caution and respect. Something had shifted. Kale looked toward Ravok, who gave him a small nod. Silent. Respectful. Acknowledging what words could not fully express. Kale understood. The real journey was just beginning. This was not the end of trials, nor the end of challenges. It was a beginning. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, and unpredictable. But Kale, the smallest species in the room, had taken the first step, and he would not stop. The corridors of Arendor Prime were silent when Kale walked back to his small quarters. The glow of alien lights reflected off polished walls, casting long shadows that seemed to follow him. He felt the weight of many eyes still on him after what had happened in the council chamber. The words of Ravok echoed in his mind. "That is why you are my little brother." Kyle had expected mockery or dismissal, but instead, the fiercest being in the galaxy had shown him respect. The thought stirred something inside him, a mixture of pride and uncertainty. Why had Ravok seen something in him that others could not? The following day, before the council could meet again, Kale received another message. It was not a request. It was a command. "Come. Ravok awaits." Kale felt his pulse quicken. He straightened his small cloak, breathed deeply, and made his way to the Apex Predator's private training hall. The hall was enormous. Its walls were lined with scars from past battles, marks of training so intense that even the strongest metals had bent under pressure. Weapons from 100 civilizations hung on the walls. Some looked like blades, others like claws, and some like tools of pure energy. At the center stood Ravok. His massive frame seemed even larger in the wide hall. He was not wearing armor, only a simple dark garment that left his arms and shoulders bare. Muscles rippled like living stone, and his glowing eyes locked onto Kale the moment he entered. "You came," Ravok said, his deep voice echoing across the chamber. Kale nodded. "You summoned me." Ravok's lips curved slightly, not into a smile but into something close to satisfaction. "Today we test you, not in battle, not with strength, but in the ways that matter most for survival." Kyle stepped forward, curious. "What kind of test?" With a motion of his hand, Ravok activated the training hall. The walls shifted, splitting into sections that slid aside to reveal a new space. It was no longer a hall but a labyrinth. Platforms rose, moving in unpredictable patterns. Beams of energy crisscrossed the air. Strange alien machines crawled across the floor, their red eyes glowing. "It is a simulation," Ravok explained. "Every warrior of my people must pass it to be recognized. Most fail. It tests not only strength but awareness, patience, and strategy. You will walk it." Kale looked at the vast obstacle course. For a large being like Ravok, it was a challenge of endurance and power. For Kale, small and light, it was different. He could not crush machines or leap great distances, but perhaps his size and mind would give him another path. "I accept," Kyle said calmly. Ravok stepped back, folding his arms. His glowing eyes did not blink. "Then begin, little brother." Kale entered the labyrinth. The air was heavy with tension. The ground beneath his feet shifted suddenly, tilting, trying to throw him off balance. Larger beings might have stumbled, but Kale's small size allowed him to adapt quickly. He crouched low, spread his weight evenly, and moved carefully across the tilting floor. The first obstacle appeared, a field of moving beams, each one humming with energy that could stun or burn. The beams were arranged in patterns meant for tall bodies to duck and leap through. For Kyle, it was different. His small frame allowed him to slip between beams with agility. Where others struggled, he found ease. Still, the test was not easy. As he advanced, alien machines rolled toward him, their red eyes glowing brighter. They were guardians, built to chase intruders. Their legs clicked against the metal ground as they advanced. Kyle's heart pounded. He had no weapon. He remembered Ravok's words, "Not with your fists, not with your claws, with your mind." So Kyle thought. He studied the machines, their movements, their sound. He noticed they paused slightly before turning, their legs stiff. That was the weakness. Kyle ran toward one machine, then darted aside, at the last moment. The machine struggled to turn quickly and Kale slipped behind it. From there he dashed forward, avoiding pursuit. He did not fight them. He outsmarted them. Ravok's deep voice echoed faintly from above. "Good. You think before you strike." Kale continued deeper. The labyrinth grew more dangerous. Platforms rose and fell, sometimes vanishing under his feet. He had to leap quickly, calculating each step. At one point he nearly fell, but his small hands gripped the edge tightly and he pulled himself up with determination. His body trembled, not from weakness, but from effort. Yet he did not stop. His mind remained sharp, seeing paths where none seemed to exist. Finally, Kale reached the core of the simulation, a glowing sphere floating above a pit of shifting energy. The sphere pulsed with light, surrounded by rotating blades and energy barriers. This was the true test. Kale studied it carefully. The blades moved in a pattern, but not a simple one. They overlapped at strange intervals, designed to confuse. A brute force approach would fail. Timing and patience were the only way. He waited, breathing deeply. He studied the rhythm, the hum of the blades, the flicker of the barriers. Slowly, the pattern revealed itself. There was a narrow moment, just a breath of time, when the blades and barriers aligned. Kyle moved. His small frame slipped through the gap, rolling under a blade and sliding between two energy walls. His timing was perfect. He reached the sphere, placed his hand on it, and the entire simulation froze. Silence filled the chamber. Then, slowly, the labyrinth dissolved, the platforms and machines fading away. The floor returned to its original smooth state. Kyle stood, there breathing heavily but steady. Ravok stepped forward. His massive form loomed over Kale, but this time it did not feel like intimidation. It felt like recognition. "You passed," Ravok said. His voice carried weight, but also respect. "Not because you are strong, not because you are fast, but because you used your mind. You found paths where others would see none. That is the mark of survival. That is the mark of greatness." Kyle looked up, meeting Ravok's glowing eyes. "Thank you," he said quietly. Ravok's deep laugh rumbled like distant thunder. "Do not thank me. You earned it. You prove that size is not the measure of power. Mind and courage are greater weapons than claws and fangs." For the first time, Kale saw something rare in Ravok's expression. Not just respect, but pride. "From this day," Ravok declared, his voice carrying through the chamber, "you are not only a representative of your people. You are my little brother, in spirit and in honor." The words struck Kale deeply. He was still the smallest being in the room, but now he carried a title that no one could dismiss. The apex predator had chosen him not as prey, not as a curiosity, but as kin. Kale bowed his head, not in submission, but in acknowledgement of a bond newly forged. The test was over, but Kale knew this was only the beginning. Beyond the council, chambers beyond this station, the galaxy was filled with dangers and mysteries, and now he would face them not alone, but as the little brother of the most feared warrior in the stars. The council chamber was restless. Voices overlapped like waves crashing against each other. Representatives from across the galaxy had gathered once again, but this time the atmosphere was heavier. Something darker lingered in the air. Kyle sat, in his seat, small as always, but now he was no longer overlooked. Since the trial in Ravok's hall, whispers about him had spread. Some called him clever, others lucky, but everyone agreed. He had earned the apex predator's respect. That made him someone to watch. The crystalline speaker raised its many-voiced tone. "News has reached us. The swarm has taken another system." The chamber fell silent. The swarm. The very name sent shivers through even the strongest species. It was not a single enemy, but countless biomechanical creatures that devoured everything in their path. They consumed metals, resources, even living beings, leaving behind lifeless worlds. "They strike without warning," said a tall, scaled warrior, his claws tapping the table in frustration. "They take entire planets in days. Even fleets cannot hold them back." Another representative, whose body shimmered like mist, added, "We cannot reason with them. They do not speak. They do not stop. They are not conquerors. They are hunger." Kyle leaned forward, his dark eyes fixed on the speaker. "How far have they spread?" he asked. His voice was calm, but every word carried weight. "Too far," the crystalline being answered. "If we do not act, they will reach the central trade routes within months." Murmurs rippled through the room. The central routes were the lifeblood of the galaxy. If those fell, entire civilizations would starve. Ravok rose from his seat. His presence silenced all noise. His massive frame loomed over the chamber, and his glowing eyes swept across the assembly. "You speak of fear," Ravok said, his deep voice echoing like thunder. "But fear will not save you. The swarm must be faced, and it must be broken." The council listened, though some shifted uneasily. Kale stood as well, his small figure beside Ravok's towering form. The contrast was striking, yet somehow fitting. "We cannot defeat them with strength alone," Kale said. "They are too many. They adapt too quickly. But there is always a weakness, something hidden, something they rely on. If we can find it, we can stop them." The chamber stirred again. Some representatives scoffed. "And you think you can find this weakness, little one?" asked a creature with 6 arms and armor like stone. Kale did not flinch. "Yes." His voice was steady, unshaken. "But I cannot do it alone. Ravok's hand fell heavy on the table, the sound like a drumbeat. He will not be alone. I will stand with him. If you doubt him, then you doubt me. The room went silent. No one dared argue with Ravok. His reputation alone was enough to silence armies. The crystalline speaker's tones wavered, then steadied. Very well. A team will be chosen. Small, fast, and skilled. You will travel to the swarm's origin point and discover what drives it. Kale nodded, his mind already racing. He knew this would not be easy. But he also knew it was necessary. The journey began aboard a sleek vessel, built for speed rather than war. Kale sat at the command console, studying maps of the affected regions. Around him a small crew prepared, a tall-scaled warrior named Dren, skilled in combat. A mist-like being called Cirrus, able to move through walls and scan with senses beyond sight. A mechanical engineer, Varin, whose cybernetic arms clicked softly as he adjusted tools. And of course, Ravok himself, whose presence alone was enough to give the crew confidence. The ship slipped into faster-than-light travel, stars stretching into lines of light outside the viewport. Kyle stood at the front, his hands clasped behind him. "We are not here to fight an army," he said firmly. "If we try, we will fail. Our task is to learn, to observe, to find the secret that holds the swarm together." Ravok's deep voice followed. "And when we find it, we strike it down." The crew nodded. Each knew the danger. Each understood the weight of the mission. Days passed in silence, broken only by the hum of engines. Kale spent hours studying reports from survivors of swarm attacks. He noticed patterns, small details others had missed. "They always move toward resource-rich worlds," Kale explained during a briefing. "But not just any resources. They target certain metals and energy sources. It's almost like they're drawn to them." Varin adjusted one of his mechanical arms. "If that's true, then maybe they have a central power source, something that requires constant feeding." Kale's eyes lit with recognition. "Exactly. If we can find that source, we can destroy it." Ravok watched silently, his glowing eyes fixed on Kale. He said nothing, but the pride in his gaze was clear. Finally, the ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Before them stretched a ruined system. Planets scarred and lifeless, their surfaces stripped bare. Floating in the void were fragments of metal drifting like bones after a feast, and then they saw it. The swarm. Countless shapes moved through space. Some were insect-like, with sharp legs and wings of metal. Others were massive, like whales made of wires and steel. Their glowing red eyes pulsed in unison, as though guided by one will. The crew stared in silence. Even Ravok's expression darkened. "They are many," Cyrus whispered, its misty form trembling slightly. "Too many." Kyle's voice was steady. "Then we will move carefully." They guided the ship through the wreckage, hiding among the fragments of destroyed vessels. Kyle watched the swarm closely, noting their movements. They were not random. They flowed like a river, always toward something. "There," Kyle said, pointing. "They are moving toward that planet." The planet was dark, its surface broken, but strange energy pulses rose from its core. The swarm moved around it like bees around a hive. "That must be their origin," Kyle said. "If we go there, we may find the truth." The ship descended into the planet's atmosphere. Ash clouds swirled around them, and the ground below was scarred by deep trenches. The swarm crawled across the surface, digging, building, reshaping the land. Kale led the team out of the ship. His small frame moved carefully, eyes sharp, studying every detail. Ravok walked beside him, his heavy steps silent despite his size. The others followed, alert and ready. They crept through the shadows of broken structures, watching as swarm creatures carried fragments of metal into a massive pit. The pit glowed with strange light, pulsing like a heartbeat. Kale's eyes widened. "That's it. That's their core." Baron's mechanical arms clicked as he adjusted his scanner. "It's not natural. It's built. Someone made this." Kale's mind raced. If the swarm was created, then it had a purpose. And if it had a purpose, it had a weakness. Suddenly, a sharp sound echoed through the air. One of the swarm creatures had spotted them. Its red eyes flared, and it let out a screeching signal. Others turned toward them, the ground trembling with their advance. "Run!" Kyle shouted. The team dashed through the ruins as swarm creatures swarmed behind them. Ravok swung his massive arm, smashing one aside. Dren's claws flashed as he cut down another. Cyrus shifted into mist, passing through walls and confusing the attackers. Kale darted ahead, small and quick, weaving through narrow gaps the others could not follow. He shouted back, "This way! Into the tunnels!" They followed him into a broken tunnel that led beneath the pit. The swarm creatures pursued, but the narrow walls slowed them. The team pressed deeper, the glow of the core growing stronger. Kale's heart pounded, but his mind was sharp. He knew they were close to the truth. And he knew that truth would decide the fate of the galaxy. The tunnels beneath the ruined planet were dark and endless. The walls were jagged, made of stone fused with metal, as if the swarm had melted the earth itself into their strange machines. A faint glow pulsed through the cracks, lighting the way like veins carrying energy. Kale led the way. His small figure slipped through narrow passages where larger beings would struggle. Behind him, Ravok's heavy footsteps echoed, steady and strong. The rest of the team followed, their eyes sharp, weapons ready. Every step deeper into the tunnels brought the same sound, the low hum of power. It was rhythmic, like the beating of a heart. Kale stopped at a bend in the tunnel. He raised his hand, signaling the others to pause. Ahead, the glow was stronger. He crouched low and peered around the corner. His eyes widened. There, at the center of a vast chamber, was the swarm's secret. A massive core pulsed with light, surrounded by machinery that seemed both alive and artificial. Tubes extended from it, pumping glowing liquid into the tunnels. Around the core, swarm creatures moved with perfect coordination, carrying metal, energy cells, and even broken remains of ships. They were not acting on instinct, they were building. Kyle's heart pounded. "This is it," he whispered. "Their heart." Varen scanned the chamber, his mechanical arms clicking as data streamed across his visor. His voice shook. This is not natural. The swarm isn't just evolving, they were made." The others froze at his words. "Made?" Dren asked, his scaled claws flexing. "By who?" Kale's eyes narrowed. He studied the machines more closely. Symbols were etched into the metal, faint but familiar. He had seen them in council records. They were the marks of several powerful species, ones who sat in the very council chamber above. "They weren't born," Kyle said slowly. "They were designed, built by a coalition of species. The swarm is not a wild enemy, it's a weapon." The silence that followed was heavy. Even Ravok's deep breathing slowed. "Why?" Cirrus whispered, its misty form trembling. Kale clenched, his fists. "To wipe out those they see as weak. To erase smaller civilizations like mine. To build a galaxy where only the strong survive." The truth cut like a blade. The swarm was not a natural plague. It was the Council's hidden plan, a tool to shape the galaxy through destruction. Ravok growled, his glowing eyes burning brighter. "Cowards. They unleash this horror, then pretend to fear it. They hide their crimes while others die." His voice was deep with anger, but his gaze turned to Kale. "Now we know. What will you do, little brother?" Kale's mind raced. They could not simply destroy the core. Its defenders were too many, and even if they succeeded, the Council would simply build another. They needed something greater. Proof. A way to expose the truth and turn the swarm against itself. "We can't just fight," Kale said firmly. "We must use their own creation against them." He pointed toward the tubes carrying glowing energy. "The swarm is controlled through this core. If I can change its commands even slightly, we can make it turn on itself. And while it destroys, itself will take evidence of who built it." Varen nodded quickly. "It's risky, but possible. If you can reach the control nodes, I can guide you in." Ravok stepped forward, his massive claws flexing. "Then you will have your chance. We will hold them off." Kale looked at him, small but steady. "I'll do it." The plan began. Dren and Ravok charged into the chamber, their roars echoing through the tunnels. Swarm creatures screeched in response, turning to meet the attackers. Claws clashed with steel, and energy blasts lit the chamber. Kyle dashed forward, his small body weaving between enemies. The swarm did not focus on him. He was too small, too quick, slipping through gaps unnoticed. He reached the base of the core, where strange terminals pulsed with light. Varen's voice came through the communicator. "Connect the device. Hurry!" Kyle pulled out a small data unit and pressed it against the terminal. Sparks flew and the light flickered. Lines of alien code scrolled across his wrist display. "Good," Varen said. "Now listen to me. You must reroute the command signals. They all flow from the center, change one pattern, and the whole swarm will follow." Kyle's fingers worked quickly, pressing symbols, aligning sequences. Sweat beaded on his forehead. The code was complex, far beyond anything his people had known, but his mind worked with calm focus. He saw the patterns hidden beneath the chaos, the rhythm of control. Behind him, the battle raged. Ravok's claws tore through machines, his roar shaking the chamber. Dren fought with desperate fury, his scales glinting in the glow. Cirrus shifted into mist, confusing enemies and striking from behind. Kale's display flashed red. Error. Override blocked. His chest tightened. "It's locked," he muttered. "Then unlock it," Varen urged. "Find another path." Kale studied the patterns again. He noticed something. The symbols etched on the machines matched the code. They were not just marks. They were keys. His mind sharpened. He remembered council records, the symbols of the species who had designed the swarm. He entered them into the code. Slowly, the lock weakened. The ground shook as more swarm creatures poured into the chamber. Ravok grabbed one, smashing it against the wall, then roared at Kyle. "Faster, little brother." Kyle's fingers flew across the display. One last symbol, one last sequence. The lock broke. The code shifted. The swarm's commands flickered. Then the creatures froze. Their red eyes blinked. Slowly they turned, not toward Kale, not toward Ravok, but toward the core itself. They screeched and attacked the very heart that had controlled them. Claws tore into machines. Beams of energy ripped through cables. The chamber shook as the swarm turned against its own origin. Kale stumbled back, eyes wide. He had done it. Ravok stood over him, his massive frame like a shield. He gave a deep laugh, even in the chaos. "You did it, little brother. You broke their leash." The core cracked, its glow dimming as the swarm ripped it apart. Pieces of machinery fell like rain, and the ground shook with the collapse. "Take the evidence," Kyle shouted to Varen. The engineer's arms snapped, capturing data from the terminals before they shattered. With proof in hand, the team fled the collapsing chamber. The tunnels rumbled as walls crumbled behind them. Swarm creatures continued tearing themselves apart, no longer united. Their purpose shattered. They burst out onto the surface just as the ground split open. The pit collapsed, swallowing the core in a storm of fire and light. The swarm above screamed, their formation breaking apart. Some fled into the stars, others crashed into the ground, lost without control. The team reached their ship and lifted off, the planet cracking beneath them. From orbit, they watched as the swarm scattered in chaos. Kale stood at the viewport, breathing hard but steady. His small frame trembled with exhaustion, yet his eyes were sharp with determination. "We have proof," he said. "The Council will know the truth, and the galaxy will know who tried to destroy us." Ravok placed a massive hand on Kale's shoulder. His voice rumbled, low but filled with pride. "You are more than little brother now. You are a leader, and together we will face what comes." Kyle nodded. The fight was not over. The swarm was broken, but the greater enemy remained, the ones who had created it, the Council itself. And Kale knew, with a fire burning inside him, that the smallest voice could bring down giants. The council chamber was a place of light and grandeur. Its dome stretched high above, carved from crystal and metal. Rows of seats curved around the center, filled with delegates from the galaxy's most powerful species. Their voices echoed, deep and proud, always debating matters of control and survival. On this day, The chamber was louder than ever. Rumors had spread like fire that a group of outsiders had returned from a swarm world, bringing secrets too dangerous to ignore. The center platform stood Kale, small, almost fragile in comparison to the towering figures surrounding him. He looked out over the sea of alien faces. He could feel their eyes, sharp and dismissive. To them, he was still a human, one of the smallest, weakest species in the galaxy. But Kale did not stand alone. Behind him, Ravok loomed like a mountain, his presence heavy with power. Beside him stood Cirrus, its misty form glowing softly, and Dren, his scaled body tense and ready. Varin adjusted his mechanical arms, the data unit in his grasp glowing, with stored proof. The council leader, a tall being with silver skin and eyes like burning suns, raised a hand. The chamber fell into silence. "Human," the leader said, voice deep and filled with authority. "You claim to have returned with knowledge of the swarm. Speak, though your words may carry little weight here." The insult was clear, but Kyle did not flinch. He stepped forward, his voice calm but strong. "You call them the swarm. You claim they are a wild plague, beyond control. But you lie. I have seen their heart. They are not born. They are built." The chamber erupted with voices. Shouts of denial, anger, and even laughter filled the air. The council leader's eyes narrowed. "Be careful, human, these are dangerous words." Kyle raised his hand and Varin stepped forward, projecting the data into the air. Holograms of the swarm core appeared above the platform, its machinery, its symbols, its codes. The same symbols that matched the marks of the very species sitting in the council chamber. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Delegates leaned forward, whispering in shock. Some recognized their own council's designs carved into the swarm's body. Kale's voice grew louder, steady as stone. "You made them. You joined together in secret, building a weapon to wipe out those you call weak. You unleashed them on countless worlds while pretending to be protectors. You wanted to control the galaxy by fear, but your weapon is broken. The swarm no longer obeys you." The council chamber trembled with outrage. Several delegates shouted, their voices sharp. "Lies! Blasphemy! This is trickery!" But Ravok's roar silenced them. His deep voice shook the walls. "I fought beside him. I saw the truth. This little one destroyed the swarm's core with his own hands. Do not call his words lies, for I swear upon my honor as an apex that they are true." His glowing eyes swept the chamber, daring any to deny him. The other warriors of the apex predator species in the chamber lowered their heads, silent. Kyle stepped forward again, his small figure lit by the hologram's glow. "You call me weak. You call my people fragile. But it was not your strength nor your wisdom that broke the swarm. It was the mind of a human. The one you dismissed. The one you ignored." The smallest voice uncovered the greatest crime. The silence that followed was heavy. Delegates shifted uneasily, their pride cracking under the weight of proof. Finally, a voice rose from the crowd. It was from a species long ignored in the chamber, a delegate from a world nearly destroyed by the swarm. "He speaks the truth. I see the symbols of those who betrayed us. The council has deceived us for too long." Others followed, their voices growing. "The council built the swarm. They used it to erase the weak. This must end." The chamber exploded in chaos. Shouts of anger, cries for justice, demands for answers filled the air. The council leader slammed his staff down, his voice cutting through the storm. "Enough!" His eyes burned as he glared at Kale. "You think you are clever, human. You think your little trick will change the order of the galaxy. But the strong rule because they must. The weak survive only under their shadow. Without us, there is only chaos." Kale's gaze was steady. "You are wrong. Strength is not only size, not only power. Strength is in unity, in courage, in standing for what is right, even when you are small. That is what makes us strong." His words rang out across the chamber, simple but sharp, carried by the silence that followed. Then Ravok stepped forward. His voice was deep, proud, and final. "You called him little brother. You thought him weak, but today, he is my equal. Today he is proof that even the smallest can stand against the greatest. The chamber stirred with awe. Delegates who once ignored Kale now looked at him with respect. Others glared with hatred, but none could deny the truth. The evidence was clear. The swarm had been created and Kale had revealed it. The council fractured that day. Several powerful species were forced to answer for their crimes. Others rose to support Kale's call for unity. For the first time, humanity's voice was heard in the great chamber of the galaxy. Days later, Kale stood aboard the ship with his allies. The galaxy was still in turmoil, the future uncertain, but for the first time he felt hope. He stood beside Ravok, watching the stars pass beyond the viewport. "Do you think they'll change?" Kale asked softly. Ravok rumbled with thought. "Some will, others will not. Change is never easy, but you have planted the seed, and seeds, little brother, grow." Kale smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I'm not finished. We must build a galaxy where no one is hunted, where no one is cast aside. Humanity may be small, but we will not be silent." Cirrus drifted beside them, its voice soft as mist. "You are no longer the smallest, Kale. You are a spark, and sparks light fires." Kale looked out at the endless stars. For so long, humans had been considered weak, unimportant. But now the galaxy knew their strength. Not in muscle or claws, but in spirit and courage and the will to stand when no one else would. He had been called Little Brother. Now he was something more, and the galaxy would never forget the day the smallest stood tallest.